History often remembers kings by their crowns, their castles, or their victories in battle. But what about the kings who left behind no glory, no honor, no legacy of greatness, only hunger, suffering, and despair? These were rulers whose greed knew no limits. Kings who taxed their people into poverty, who squeezed every last coin from the hands of farmers, widows, and even children. To them, gold was worth more than life itself. Tonight, we journey across centuries, from the palaces of England to the burning streets of Rome, from the golden halls of Versailles to the blood-soaked fields of the Congo, to uncover the darkest rulers in history. These are the greediest kings who taxed their people to death.
Our story begins in medieval England. The year is 1199, and a new king has just taken the throne. John, the youngest son of the legendary King Henry II. Unlike his brother Richard the Lionheart, who was famed for courage, John would become infamous for something very different: his greed. Scene setting: John's rule marked by endless wars in France. Wars cost money. John needed gold. But instead of winning loyalty, he drained his kingdom. Narrator, dramatic. John found a simple solution: tax everything. If you owned land, you paid. If you wanted to marry, you paid. If your husband died and you wished to remarry, the king demanded his share first. There was even a tax for not going to war, called scutage. It became so common that peasants joked there was no such thing as free air in John's England. Visual prompt: tax collectors dragging sacks of grain from a peasant's hut while the family cries. Story scene: dramatized dialogue. Peasant whispering, "Please, my lord, I've nothing left for my children." Tax collector coldly, "Then sell the children. The king's gold must come first." Narrator: under John, cruelty became routine. When nobles refused his demands, he seized their estates. When villages couldn't pay, soldiers burned their crops. The more he taxed, the more his people hated him. Turning point: the barons rebel. In 1215, England's most powerful barons had enough. They forced John to sign the Magna Carta, a document limiting his power and demanding justice. But John, true to his nature, had no intention of honoring it. He taxed even harder, trying to reclaim his lost glory. His greed sparked civil war, and his kingdom nearly collapsed. Narrator: dramatic close for chapter. King John's reign ended not with cheers, but with curses. He died in 1216, hated by his people, remembered not as a warrior or builder, but as the king who tried to tax England to death. His greed gave birth to one of history's most important documents, the Magna Carta, but his name remains forever stained.
200 years after King John's tyranny, across the English Channel, another monarch would rise. He called himself the Sun King. His name was Louis XIV of France. For 72 years, the longest reign of any European king, Louis ruled France. To his admirers, he was the embodiment of glory, the center of power, the man who declared, "L'État c'est moi," I am the state. But behind the gold, the silk, and the endless balls at Versailles, the truth was much darker. Louis XIV built his paradise upon the starvation of his people. In 1682, Louis moved his court to a new palace outside Paris, Versailles. It was not merely a residence, it was a statement of divine power. Marble halls, endless mirrors, golden fountains. The palace swallowed more money than entire cities. And who paid for this glittering monument? Not the king, not the nobles who danced at his feasts. It was the common people of France, the farmers, the craftsmen, the laborers, crushed beneath an avalanche of taxes. Taxes on salt, bread, and windows. Narrator, Sharp Cone. Louis XIV didn't just tax land, he taxed the very necessities of life. The gabelle, a tax on salt, meant peasants had to pay just to preserve food. Bread, the foundation of every meal, carried its own levy. Even windows were taxed. The more windows in your house, the higher your bill. The result? Families boarded up windows to save money, living in dark, airless rooms while her king's palace glowed with thousands of candles. The contrast. While peasants struggled to buy bread, Louis hosted feasts where the tables bent under roasted boar, fountains of wine, and exotic fruits from across the world. A servant once wrote, "The king's dogs eat better than most of France." And still, more taxes came. War after war drained the treasury. Louis demanded funds to fight the Dutch, the Spanish, the English. Every lost battle was paid for, not in his palace, but in the broken backs of farmers. The seeds of revolution. Louis XIV died in 1715, leaving France glittering on the outside, but hollow within. His legacy was a nation drowning in debt, a people crushed by hunger, and a monarchy hated more than ever before. Though the French Revolution would erupt decades later, it was Louis XIV who planted its seeds. Every starving child, every boarded-up window, every family broken by his taxes, brought France one step closer.
In the 1st century AD, Rome was the beating heart of the ancient world. Its empire stretched across continents, its armies unmatched, its wealth beyond imagination. But in 54 AD, a young man took the throne, a man who would push Rome into chaos. His name was Nero. He called himself an artist, a poet, even a god. But to the people of Rome, he became something else entirely, a tyrant who taxed his empire into ruin. A performer on the throne. Nero was unlike any emperor before him. Instead of ruling wisely, he longed to perform. He sang, he played the lyre, he forced senators to sit through endless recitals. But his art came at a price. Every performance, every golden statue, every extravagant palace was paid for, not by Nero, but by his people. To fund his luxuries, he created new taxes, heavy levies on trade, property, inheritance, and even the wages of soldiers. The Great Fire of Rome. In 64 AD, disaster struck. A fire swept through Rome, destroying homes, temples, and lives. For days, flames devoured the city. People whispered that Nero himself ordered the fire, clearing space for a new palace. And indeed, as ashes cooled, Nero announced his grand project, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. A palace so vast, it included lakes, gardens, and walls plated in gold. Cruelty of collection. Roman tax collector. Your house is gone, but the emperor's needs remain. Pay for his golden palace. Homeless citizen, weeping. I've lost everything, even my children. Tax collector. Then give what remains, your labor, your coin, your blood. Nero's Rome demands it. Nero treated his empire like a treasure chest.
He seized the estates of nobles accused of treason, executed senators to steal their fortunes, and taxed provinces until rebellion brewed. The empire's wealth flowed into one man's vanity. Rebellion in the provinces. In Gaul, Spain, and Judea, unrest grew. Citizens who once admired Rome now saw it as a parasite. Tax collectors became targets of mobs. Governors begged for relief, but Nero demanded more gold, more tribute, more sacrifices for his art. Nero's fall. In 68 AD, Nero's greed finally consumed him. The Senate declared him a public enemy. As soldiers marched on Rome, Nero fled. Alone, abandoned, and despised, he took his own life, whispering, "What an artist dies in me." But history does not remember Nero as an artist. It remembers him as a tyrant who taxed his people into despair, a man who burned his own city, and a ruler whose hunger for gold and glory left Rome scarred for.
In the 17th century, the Mughal Empire stood as one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms in the world. Its emperors, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, were famed for tolerance, art, and the majestic Taj Mahal. But in 1658, a new emperor took the throne. His name was Aurangzeb. Unlike his predecessors, he cared little for beauty or tolerance. His legacy would not be art, but austerity, not harmony, but division, and above all, crushing taxes. The jizya tax. Aurangzeb was a devout Muslim, but his devotion turned into obsession. Where Akbar had abolished the jizya tax on non-Muslims, Aurangzeb reinstated it with brutal force. Every Hindu family was required to pay simply for practicing their faith. Poor farmers, already struggling to survive, now carried an extra burden. Taxes collected in the name of God, but spent in the name of empire. The weight of endless levies. But the jizya was not the only tax. There were duties on trade, on farming, on nearly every transaction of life. Villagers told stories of selling their cattle, their tools, even their daughters' dowries, just to pay what Aurangzeb demanded. Entire regions began to empty as peasants fled their lands to escape collection. Where once the Mughal Empire flourished with trade and agriculture, now fields lay abandoned.
In the early 14th century, France stood at the center of European power. Its king, Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, was tall, handsome, and regal. But behind his noble face lay one of the coldest hearts in history. Philip was not a builder, not a warrior, not a man of art. He was a hunter, not of animals, but of money. And to fill his treasury, no target was off limits. Not peasants, not nobles, not even the church itself. Taxes on everyone. Philip needed money for wars with England and Flanders. His answer? More taxes. Peasants paid crushing levies on land and trade. Merchants paid tariffs on goods moving through towns. Even the clergy, the church, untouchable under most kings, were forced to hand over silver and gold. Clash with the Pope. When Pope Boniface VIII protested, declaring that only the church could tax clergy, Philip struck back. His agents kidnapped the Pope himself, beating him in public. The Pope died soon after, humiliated. And Philip, he placed a new Pope on the throne, one loyal to France, ruling from Avignon instead of Rome. Even God's house had not escaped his hunger for gold. The fall of the Knights Templar. But Philip's greatest act of greed came in 1307. The Knights Templar, a powerful order of warrior monks, had grown rich from banking and crusades. Philip owed them enormous debts. Instead of paying, he destroyed them. On Friday, October 13th, his soldiers arrested Templars across France. They were accused of heresy, tortured into confessions, and burned at the stake. Their wealth flowed straight into Philip's treasury. Dramatized scene. Templar Knight. We fought for God. We lent you gold. We guarded your kingdom. Why betray us? Philip IV. Because your gold serves you better than it serves me. With fire, Philip erased his debt. Legacy of ruthlessness. Philip IV died in 1314, his coffers heavy with stolen wealth. But his dynasty did not last. Within a generation, his sons were dead without heirs, and France plunged into the chaos of the 100 Years' War. The money he hunted gave him power in life, but it bought nothing in death. Not loyalty, not love, not even a lasting dynasty.
Empires fall, palaces crumble, gold rusts. But the suffering of the people, their hunger, their tears, their broken lives, remains carved in memory. And so, centuries later, we still whisper their names. John, Louis, Nero, Aurangzeb, Philip, Leopold. Not as kings of glory, but as kings of greed.
Across centuries, across continents, the story has repeated itself. Kings and emperors, men cloaked in silk and gold, demanding tribute from those who had nothing left to give. King John of England drained his nobles until rebellion carved his name into shame. Louis XIV bathed Versailles in light, while peasants lived in darkness. Nero burned Rome and taxed the ashes. Aurangzeb cloaked his greed in faith and shattered an empire. Philip IV turned on knights, priests, and peasants alike, hunting money like prey. And Leopold II stretched his greed beyond borders, taxing not in coins, but in blood. The pattern is always the same. Greed builds palaces. Greed funds armies. Greed feeds egos. But greed also destroys. It destroys villages, families, nations. It topples dynasties. It ignites rebellions. The kings thought they were eternal, untouchable. But history remembers not their crowns, not their glory, not their gold, only their hunger. From medieval England to colonial Africa, the truth is clear. A kingdom built on blood and taxes will drown in its own greed. And so we ask, what is the true wealth of a king? Gold locked in vaults? Palaces carved in marble, or the loyalty of his people? History answers, those who choose gold over loyalty, greed over mercy, power over compassion, are remembered not as rulers, but
By the late 19th century, Europe's kings were no longer just rulers of nations. They had become hunters of empires. Colonies in Africa and Asia promised wealth beyond imagination. But no king exploited this more ruthlessly than Leopold II of Belgium. Unlike other monarchs, Leopold did not tax his own people heavily. No, his greed reached far beyond Belgium's borders, across the sea, into the very heart of Africa. There, in the Congo, he created one of history's most brutal systems of taxation, one measured not in coins, but in blood. The Congo Free State.
In 1885, Leopold claimed the Congo as his personal property, not a colony of Belgium, but his own private empire, the Congo Free State. But there was nothing free about it. Leopold declared that every village must deliver taxes in ivory and later in rubber. These were not payments people could choose, but quotas enforced with whips, guns, and chains. Taxes in blood. When villagers failed to meet their quotas, punishments were merciless. Soldiers burned villages, took women hostage, and cut off the hands of men as proof that bullets had not been wasted. Fathers watched their children starve, mothers begged for mercy, and still the taxes came: ivory, rubber, blood. Leopold's fortune grew. His palaces in Brussels sparkled with wealth stolen from Africa, while millions in Congo suffered and died. Dramatized scene. Villager, weak voice. "We have no more rubber. The vines are dry." Soldier, raising rifle. "Then give your hand. The king must be paid." Narrator, low whisper. For Leopold, human lives were currency. The scale of greed. Narrator, historians estimate that between 10 and 15 million people died under Leopold's regime, killed by starvation, exhaustion, disease, and punishment. It was taxation unlike any the world had ever seen, not to fill a nation's treasury, but to satisfy the greed of one man. Leopold II became one of the richest kings in Europe, his wealth built on a mountain of corpses. Exposure and denial. Narrator, at first Europe turned a blind eye, but missionaries, journalists, and whistleblowers began to tell the truth. The horrors of Congo reached the newspapers: photographs of mutilated villagers, testimonies of entire tribes wiped out. Leopold, cornered, denied everything. He claimed his work in Congo was charitable, bringing civilization and Christianity, but the world no longer believed him. By 1908, he was forced to hand Congo over to the Belgian state. Yet he kept his personal fortune, the blood gold of Africa. The Monster King. Narrator, dark closing. Leopold II died in 1909, despised by many, though buried with royal honors, but history does not honor him. He is remembered as the king whose taxes were measured not in coins, but in human lives. His empire was built not on loyalty, but on fear. His legacy is a scar that Africa still carries to this day.